Good day. My name is Rob Carpenter, and I'm co-chairman and CEO of Prospector Metals Corporation. I'm joining you today from the offices of the Discovery Group in downtown Vancouver. It's the first day of the Cordilleran and Roundup, and everybody's excited to catch up and talk about all of their projects and all the plans for 2025. So today, I'm going to give you a brief corporate update of Prospector, followed by an outline of our proposed drill plan in 2025 for our flagship project, ML, which is located in Yukon. For those of you who are not familiar with our company, we trade on the TSX Venture under PPP, and we trade on the OTCQB under PMCOF, and in Frankfurt under 1ETO. This trader and ticker information can be found at the bottom of each slide that I'll be presenting today. Our business model is simple: create transformational wealth through the discovery of large or district-scale mining camps. Our company is technically driven, and we use in-house geoscientists to evaluate opportunities globally. We focus primarily on early-stage or greenfield projects because these projects are the ones that offer shareholders the most upside or torque in the mining cycle. We take a portfolio approach in order to expose our shareholders to year-round exploration and upside. Now, that said, our ML project has risen from the pack based on our 2024 work, namely high-grade and extensive nature of surface gold mineralization that had not been previously drill tested. Today, I'm going to take you through these results from 2024 and explain our strategy for 2025. So today, I'll be making many forward-looking statements about our 2025 work plans. I'm recording this on January 20th, 2025. And as of today, once our plans crystallize further, we'll be reporting through news releases, and usually in the coming weeks as things start to crystallize further. We take our corporate and our technical disclosure very seriously. If anyone has any questions or comments about our information, technical or otherwise, please reach out. Prospector is a member of the Discovery Group, which is an alliance of publicly traded companies which is based in Vancouver. The companies are independent, but they share synergy that results in considerable corporate cost savings. Discovery Group was founded by John Robbins and Jim Paterson, and here you can see on the slide some of the member groups, past and present. Prospector represents my second leadership role in the Discovery Group. In 2005, I co-founded Kaminak Gold Corporation with John Robbins. And in 2010, we led Kaminak through the initial discovery of the Coffee District in Yukon to a several million ounce gold resource, which is eventually bought for over $500 million by then Gold Corp. That was quite a wild ride for all of us, and it proved to be a big win for early shareholders, or those who invested before our initial drilling. And that's critical, is getting positioned and getting a shareholding before the drilling is done. Now, what's our model with Prospector? It's to simply do it all over again. It's hard, and it requires a lot of dedication, but we feel we've got the great property portfolio now to repeat. You can see from this slide that many other Discovery Group companies have also created wealth for shareholders and been bought out at good valuations, namely Great Bear in 2018, which was led by Chris Taylor. The people. So Prospector has a well-engaged corporate team. We have weekly management meetings, and which are attended by board members and advisors. So a lot of engagement, which is very critical. Myself, I'm a geologist, and I've spent 35 years studying and exploring for large district-scale mineral systems. As a young geologist, I worked for many major mining companies, and I was lucky enough to be involved in some great discoveries, including Meliadine, where I completed my PhD thesis about 20 years ago. I think a very important thing that Prospector shareholders should know and should see as great value, and that's that I work full-time for Prospector. I'm not involved in any other company as a director or advisor. Similarly, I've bought significant stock in each private placement over the last 2 years. So I'm involved 100%, and I'm not distracted by other deals. I've worked with John and Jim for over 20 years, since before Discovery Group was a formal entity. As I mentioned, John and myself co-founded Kaminak in 2005. We all communicate very frequently and are all very large shareholders in Prospector. Our in-house technical team has worked steadily with me for almost 2 decades, and together we cover all of the bases: geology, geophysics, geochemistry, and most importantly, structural geology. If I could sum up our Prospector group in a few words, it would be experience, respect, and still a big hunger for more success. A quick snapshot of our corporate data. Currently 57 million shares issued outstanding. This is as of January 20th, 2025. We currently have about $1 million in cash on hand, and many of the warrants, most of the warrants you see on the screen here, are held by insiders or close associates. At a 30-cent share strike price, we would need a triple in our current share price for these warrants to be exercised. Troilus Gold is our largest single shareholder, and that was obtained through purchase of the ML property, which they had previously owned. We maintained great communication with Troilus, and they are up to speed on all of our progress. In mid-2024, we brought B2 Gold as a strategic investor at 9.9% ownership. Proceeds from this financing were also allocated to the 2024 program at ML. This relationship has extended into technical aspects as well. B2 visited the project this summer, and one of their senior staff remained on site for several weeks. We've received very valuable feedback from their group, and the 2025 work plan I'm going to show you today was crafted with B2's input. Insider ownership of Prospector Metals is very significant. Personally, I've bought over 2.4 million shares in financings, and in our last financing in spring 2024, that saw every director write a check. Insiders at Prospector were not escrowed shares at deep discounts, and my personal ACB is much higher than the current share price. As I mentioned earlier, Prospector has my full-time attention, and I have significant incentive to make this company a success. Okay, so on to the project itself. ML, you can see from this map here, is located with the big yellow dot, and that is about 60 kilometers northeast of Dawson City in Yukon, which is road accessible through Whitehorse, for those of you who have never been to Yukon. Many large discoveries have been found in the Yukon over the years, but I think what's important is that you can see from this map that big district-scale discoveries continue to be found regularly. For example, Snowline, Kaminak, and Underworld have all been found since 2009. Each of these companies made significant money for shareholders despite a prolonged weak investment climate for juniors. In other words, big high-grade deposits are still being found in Yukon, and by no means is this a mature exploration district. With respect to our ML project, the last work on this project was actually 2008, well before the last gold exploration in the Yukon. So why was ML dormant for the last 15 years? Well, mainly because it sat unknowingly in the portfolio of a company focused elsewhere. Troilus Gold acquired ML through its amalgamation transaction back in 2009. But that company went on to develop significant gold resources in Quebec. So ML sat orphaned, if you will, until early 2024, when we approached Troilus about purchasing it. So now I'm going to go through what work we did in 2024 and how it led us to our proposed drill program in 2025. So the remainder of this presentation will be largely technical, and I will be guilty of speaking some geology ease. I'm sorry about that. But the core takeaways are simple. ML represents a very unique opportunity to test a dense cluster of high-grade gold targets that have essentially been overlooked for close to a generation. The coming slides will have a lot of text on them, and this should be used for reference. I will not be reading the text word for word. Instead, I will be using my cursor to explain and add context to the geological maps and cross-sections. Since this is a recorded presentation, you have the benefit of stopping, rewinding, going back, and reading, and you can focus on parts of the presentation you prefer, and I would encourage that. What my goal here through the narration is to give context and meaning to the maps and diagrams. As you can see, ML is host to many significant eye-popping grades and intervals, particularly at the Skarn Ridge area and North Vein area. But the previous work never flushed out resources. Nonetheless, our work in 2024 led us to construct a new structural or geological model that allowed us to identify the key fault zones that are important to the mineralizing event. And this is the key to gold exploration in this part of the world. So we think we've, quote, cracked the code as to what the source and the mechanism for gold transport are. Quickly, in summary, in the red here, you can see our target is a high-grade, structurally controlled gold deposit. And the fault zones that host this gold are most likely near vertical, and they have significant alteration. So the deposit type we're looking for is very much akin to something you might find in the Canadian Shield, for example. Long, tabular shaped zones and faults that host high-grade gold zones. Now, if you were following the story early in 2024, we talked a lot about intrusions and IRGS. And you can see in this geological map here, these big pink blobs are the tombstone intrusions. One in the north, one in the middle, one in the south. And although we believe those are important mineralizing features, the structure itself, the main structure, goes right through the entire property and every rock in every lithological formation. So the intrusions are there, they're important, but they're not the whole story. You need to be looking for the fault zones that penetrate in and out of the intrusions. And that was really our key takeaway in 2024. We had a property-wide LiDAR survey, which, as you know, is a laser guided topographic map with extreme precision. And that's new information and new data. In 2008, that type of data was not available, and that's helped us map the structures and the fault zones and the mineralizing structures with great reliability. We did some hyperspectral work from satellite imagery to help identify the minerals. And this also helped us vector in with our structural mapping and prospecting in 2024. We also did a number of things that help advance the project from ESG perspective. We looked at a heritage overview assessment. We've done baseline water sampling, caribou mitigation, and we did some cleanup on some previous sites. So moving on to 2025. Our work in 2024 led us to the confidence that we should be drilling some of these prospects. And what we want to do is we want to drill 25 holes over 5 to 6 target areas. And you can see those target areas here are on the map. From north to south, it's Java, North Vein, and I'll say Cirque Rubble really is one because they connect, Skarn Ridge, and Bueno. So those are the key areas we want to drill on. And we think we'd like to do about 5,000 meters, and we'd like to start doing that with one drill in late Q2 2025. As I mentioned, today is January 20th, 2025. This information will be updated via news release or subsequent presentations as those days get closer. We've submitted our Class 1 land use permit to the Yukon government, and we have been told their evaluation process should be completed by March. So that gives us sufficient time to finance and mobilize and get results this summer. Our project sits on the traditional territory of the Trondikwitchin government and with minor overlap with Nacho Dun. We've been very proactive in our work plan and consultation, and we've initiated baseline water and heritage surveys as part of our work, which I had mentioned previous slide. So the next slides are going to go through each of these target areas somewhat technically to highlight our proposed strategy and what we hope to obtain through the drilling. Again, I'll be starting in the north at Java and working my way to the south. Okay, so Java. The image you're seeing here, first off, let me start with this little inset map. So every one of my cross-sections is going to have this inset map. And this is the property, right? So we're at Java up at the top here, and each of these yellow circles is a different prospect I'm going to talk about. So, starting at Java in the north. So this is a cross-section or a slice through the prospect in 3D. The purple and red dots here are surface samples that were taken by our crew this summer. You can see significant grades, multi-ounce material, over 10 grams, and there's a historical trench here that ran 14 grams over 1.5 meters. All of it is an outcrop. This prospect had never been drilled before. The trace of the mineralization on surface is at least 150 meters. We think this should be drill tested. And this orange, pinkish, tabular body you're seeing here is our expected or predicted mineralized zone. And that's drawn based on our structural mapping and our measurements that we've taken on surface. The hole we want to drill is here. So this is the collar, and this is the hole we'd like to drill through it. And this will give us a complete true width analysis of this prospect. If we hit something we liked, we might drill a second hole as an undercut. We have significant evidence to believe that there's more than one structure here. The back side of this image up towards where the N here, where my cursor is pointing, there's a significant soil anomaly that's high in gold. So we believe there might be a number of parallel structures, and our drilling will cut through this entire section to evaluate this prospect. One final thing on Java, and this goes for all of our prospects. The signature with the mineralization is gold, arsenic, copper, antimony, and tellurium. It's a very distinct geochemical assemblage, and it's a very distinct mineralogy. Now, what's important is each of the prospects I'm going to talk about today have very similar mineralogy, which means what works for one of these exploration should work for all of them. And it happens over several kilometers. So it's a very rich district or regional scale mineralizing event. And that's one of the part of one of the reasons why we believe this is a very large mineral system. Okay, so you can see on our inset map here, we just talked about Java, and now we're just moving to the south a few hundred meters to look at the North Vein prospect. And this is a prospect that was originally drilled in 2005 by a company called Dynamite. You can see the results here, very impressive, good width and good grade. These are very significant, structurally controlled gold, lode gold type intercepts. And here on the left side of the image, you have their historical drilling going through like this. Now, this section you're looking at is very thick. So all of those holes are not in the same section. It's about a 300-meter wide section. So you're looking into the screen by 300 meters. The shallow holes have some very good intercepts. The deeper holes missed. And that led to a little bit of confusion on the geometry of this section. Our structural mapping and our satellite imagery really helped us nail down the real important mineralizing structures on this prospect. And the original interpretation by the group that worked in 2005 was that the gold system was trending like this, which was the trend of the stratigraphy or the bedding. Our mapping suggests it's actually going the other way. And why is that important? Well, because if you're drilling from south to north, you should be expecting certain results. But drilling north to south, we feel gives a better section. So our philosophy on this, you can see our proposed holes, might be to drill 4 holes, perhaps 6, and to validate the idea that this system actually is not trending to the south, but trending to the north. And this could really help connect the dots and put the geometry together. This zone has been traced on surface for over 650 meters, and you can see these intercepts are well over 100 meters depth from surface. So we think some key holes coming from the opposite direction here could really help us put together the geometry and understand and predict how this deposit or potential deposit looks in form on surface and at depth. Moving a little bit further south now, I'm going to skip Rubble and Cirque, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit those at the end, but I'm going to go right over to Skarn Ridge and Bueno. And you can see here on this is a 3D section cut through, and notice the scale. That's 1 kilometer across the width of that image. Skarn Ridge in the west, and Bueno in the east. In my opinion, this is the guts of the ML mineralizing system. Java and North Vein are great targets, and both deserve to be drilled. However, Skarn Ridge Bueno hosts multiple closely spaced structures, whereas Java and North Vein appear to be single or perhaps 2 structures. So the images I just showed you from Java and North Vein, pretty straightforward, perhaps 1, perhaps 2 dipping structures. What makes this area different is that there could be up to 10 or even a dozen or more of these mineralizing structures that are very closely spaced. Skarn Ridge here in the west has been drill tested. And you can see these are the historical drill holes. And you can see some very impressive drilling intercepts. This hole 0701 actually included, I think, 59 meters at 3.5 grams. But again, they had a hard time putting geometry together and predicting the shape of something that could become a resource. And that's quite simple, is the orientation of that drilling needed to be in the opposite direction to test the true scale and true width of these. So instead of being a shallow, mildly dipping sheet, we're actually looking at vertical sheets that are parallel to the surface of the screen you're looking at. And there's a big wide area between Bueno and Skarn Ridge that remains untested. Bueno itself, multiple trenches, multiple high-grade results, but never drilled. So we're looking forward to getting into this system and really testing the idea that there's high angle or near vertical structures as opposed to flat-lying bedding controlled mineralization. So first off, I'm going to start at Skarn Ridge, and I'm going to show you a plan map with a section that incorporates our observations and our predicted geometry for our drilling. Okay, so detailed imagery on Skarn Ridge. I'd like you to focus on the top part of this image first. This is a plan map of the Skarn Ridge area with previous drilling highlighted. And you can see very good intercepts. These are the same intercepts you looked at on the previous map. And the orange or flesh-colored lines are our interpreted structural zones or mineralizing fault zones. Remember, Java and North Vein had each one, perhaps two of these zones. Skarn Ridge has a very dense cluster of several that are very closely spaced. And you can look below, this is the cross-section below, right? And here are, again, the similar drill intercepts. Now, our proposed drilling is to go across these zones to test true width and scale. And this proposed drill plan will provide a fence across the entire structural zone, which will tell us, A, how many of these structures there are, B, the width, and the assays will tell us the grade. I'm very excited about this prospect. The previous drilling identified a number of really good deep intercepts, but essentially the drilling was drilled in the wrong direction. And that's not because the guys didn't know what they were doing. It's because based on current data and current information they had, they thought it was shallow, flat. Our reinterpretation and really our knowledge of how gold deposits form in the Yukon in the last 15 years has changed. And our interpretation that these things are high angle and high grade really deserve to be drill tested, and we're excited. So now I'm going to go a little bit to the south and show you the Bueno plan and cross section. So here we are. We're several hundred meters south of Skarn Ridge. And the first thing I'll point out is here are the orange, flesh-colored structural zones that we interpret from our data sets. There's some historical trench data here, which trenching actually was done parallel to the interpreted or inferred zone trend. Very high grade here, very good trenches. And these samples are our samples here from last summer, some multi-ounce material. There was a previous drill hole here in 2005 that was drilled this way, essentially parallel to the mineralized zones. I've stood at that drill collar, and when you walk up, you can see these trenches, and you can make structural measurements that are consistent with the trend of the mineralizing system being north-south. So our plan, much like Skarn Ridge, will be to propose holes to drill to the west and to the east. And our hopes here are to capture each of these structural zones, find out their true width and their grade. So what I really like personally about Bueno and Skarn Ridge is that in 2 holes, we could potentially test 5 to 6 of these individual structures. That's a very exciting opportunity. Certainly the grades in the trenches, which are bedrock, and our samples, which are bedrock, are extremely encouraging. And when you look at the fact that this area has not been drill tested in a reliable manner, it's going to be an exciting summer. Okay, so finally, I'm going to go back to the middle, which is the Cirque rubble. And on this map, what I'd like to show you is this is the intrusion, the tombstone intrusion, or the IRGS intrusion in the pink. Skarn Ridge in the limestone rocks off to the southwest, and then Bueno down here. So we just talked about this corridor, which is limestone hosted. Our North Vein and Java are up here. So now we're in between those two. And what we've noticed through our prospecting and our LiDAR and structural analysis is the shear zones or the fault zones here trend east-west. And there seems to be preferred corridors, which is actually pretty exciting. The rock sample here on the right is a sample that we took from that's a boulder, but it literally fell right off of the wall. You can put it back into place. And what I'd like to point out here is this rusty surface is actually the surface of a sheeted vein. And the sheeted vein has chalcopyrite, arsenopyrite, tourmaline, antimony, tellurium, and runs a gram or two gold as well from our assays. This is an IRGS intrusion, a porphyritic monzonite, and in here you can see there's many, many, many sheeted veins as well. And we don't have a cross chip sample of this, but we do believe that the nature of the mineralization in these intrusions becomes wider spaced. So remember I talked about Skarn Ridge and Bueno, discrete high-grade structures. And then when this structure seems to hit the intrusion, it spaces out into what we think is an IRGS type mineralizing system. These rocks deserve to be drill tested as well. Some very remarkable high grades in grab samples from the ML intrusion this summer as well. And what we think right now, the preferred corridor goes east-west from the Rubble zone through to the Cirque zone. Our plan will be to drill test at least one fence, perhaps two fences, across what we feel is the most favorable part, so we can figure out which area has the most vein density, the biggest and most intense alteration system, and get a feel for the gold grade. So this type of target represents the most closest thing that we would refer to as a bulk tonnage or an IRGS target. What I'd also like to point out, which I probably should have pointed out earlier, is that these rocks are not oxidized. This is not a heap leach type setting. These rocks are sulfide, and there's arsenopyrite and chalcopyrite and electrum right on surface. So it would never be a heap leach type setting. It's more of a classic sort of gold off the shelf metallurgy, if you will. Okay, so we've made it through the core targets. I took you through Java. Remember, that's the one never been drilled before, multiple ounce material on surface and trenches. We're going to drill through the hillside, see if we can't capture the true thickness and the grade of Java and any hiding structures that may not have daylighted. Remember North Vein? Previous drilling indicated a south dipping sheet. Our structural mapping suggests it's actually north dipping. We feel that reorienting holes from north to south will help us get the proper geometry and really try to figure out if this thing can be a resource or not. And then we get into the guts of the system. We talked about Skarn Ridge and Bueno. How previous interpretations were that it was a flat-lying copper ridge zone. We feel it's north-south trending, high angle or near vertical structures. And unlike North Vein and Java, we feel this is where there's high clusters of these structures. So our objective here will to be do fences across each of these zones in order to capture all of the different structures we think are there and get a reliable grade. In between those, you have the Cirque Rubble trend. This is the one I just talked about a few moments ago. This is more of the classic IRGS type bulk target. As this major structure goes through the property, in the intrusion, the mineralization seems to be spaced, but the mineralization goes out of the intrusion into Skarn Ridge Bueno and into the north towards North Vein and Java. And when it does, instead of having a number of small discrete structures, they seem to coalesce into larger, thicker ones. So the target is more of a higher grade structural target in these settings. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate that. As I mentioned, more information on the fine-tuning and nature and timing of our drill program in 2025 will be available. I encourage you to sign up for updates on our website, or also email us or contact us anytime if you have any questions. Thank you very much.